This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, truth seekers and true crime junkies. We are back with our episode of Hit the Road, Jack, looking for the Zodiac. Let me just correct my sound there real quick. Okay, so hopefully that's fine. Jumping right back into the PowerPoint presentation, we left off last week on one of the cutout postcards that was sent by the Black Dahlia Avenger to the police department and to the Herald Express. And this one we talked a little bit about. It said to the effect, "That young, I'll do him like I did the Black Dahlia Avenger." And of course, we talked a little bit about the arrows that are being used at this point. We can see there with the red arrow here pointing to the hand-drawn arrow that is then pointing at a picture of Armand Robles. And of course, above his head says next. This is one of the areas where we find that there's a capital XT and a lowercase ne. So we see the mix of lowercase and capital letters. Let's see here. It looks like the postcard with cutouts in the photo with the next hand written over the top of his head with an arrow pointing to him is very similar to a postcard, a cutout, no less, postcard sent by the Zodiac to a Mr. Adams, in which case he indicated that Mr. Adams was next in that particular postcard. So there is that cross connection between these communications and the ones we'll see in the 60s and 70s. So the cutouts we already know is a Zodiac, D.B. Cooper, Donna Lass, I-45 killer, and of course, we talked a little bit about this idea behind the Black Dahlia adventure. If he's the Avenger, then wouldn't he be avenging her death by looking for those that had killed her? Which I'm not really seeing that happen because, of course, we're going to go into a slew of female murders where obviously he's not really avenging the Black Dahlia by taking those out that were responsible for her death. So next is also used throughout all of the communications. We've probably already seen it a couple times, the idea that there's going to be more, or that somebody is next, or that he is communicating his intentions for that next victim. Now, Armand Robles was not one of his victims, aside from being robbed by this perpetrator. He was not killed by him. So I think he just used this as a ploy, to try to indicate that this was possibly the person who killed Black Dahlia, but then he turns around and takes credit for killing the Black Dahlia and says that this guy is next. So we do see a little bit of game playing there and some swapping of the information to have some fun with the police. So the author attempted to use capital letters, just as we just said. The X and the T in the word next are capitalized, while the N and the E are lowercase. The suspect that killed the Black Dahlia stole the wallet and used the pictures in his ruse. Again, we talked about what we think in regards to whether or not he's really avenging the Black Dahlia's death, or there had been some talks by Harriet Suchet in regards to Jack informing on those responsible that she found in her solves. But then why take credit for a murder if you didn't commit it? That brings us into our next murder, our next red lipstick murder, which occurred on February 10th, 1947. Jean Axford Thomas French was killed 16 feet from 3200 Grandview Lane and Indianapolis Street in Los Angeles. This is number 5 in Hodell's book, also a Lover's Lane dump site, which is consistent with the Zodiac and Black Dahlia, Texarkana, the Dania Beach, Florida. And we also see that the husband is a Frank F. French. I don't know that that played into this particular crime at this point in time. I think that they were already separated, but I will give you some background on French. So basically, Jean then went out after visiting Frank and ended up at the Piccadilly Drive-In at 3932 Sepulveda Avenue in Los Angeles between 12 and 1 a.m. A car hop was stated later saying that he saw French eating with a mystery man, later leaving her car parked there. A janitor later claimed the car was still parked there well after 2 a.m., so it is obvious to conclude that Jean then left in the car with her murderer, unknowingly, of course. 44 years old, found nude in a vacant lot, bludgeoned, beaten, and stomped to death, strangled, signs of torture, after being seen in the downtown Hollywood bars with a brown-haired man. A message written in lipstick, possibly referring to the short crime, was written on the body. The link between the red lipstick killer, lipstick killings, and Black Dahlia occur in this murder. Now, we do see the one that Mary Tate that was just previous to this that was also purportedly written on with lipstick. So we do have another one that is a cross connection between the lipstick killings. So the Moors is actually where they have a lonely lover's lane, and basically the car parked near Sepulveda Boulevard in Washington place at 3:25 a.m. on Monday morning. So it says it was 8:15 on February 10th, 1947, a sleepy Monday morning in West Los Angeles. H.C. Shelby, a 42-year-old bulldozer operator, was on his way to a job site, one of the endless housing tracts springing up in the post-war boom, just off of Grandview Boulevard on an isolated, weedy stretch of land nicknamed the Moors. Shelby noticed a pile of stylish women's clothing. When he went to investigate, he found the naked body of a dark-haired woman face up beneath a dew-covered red dress and blue coat with fox fur cuffs. I'm highlighting this in particular because we do have the desktop poem in the Riverside area crime of Sherry Jo Bates, where the suspect literally talks about the red dress or having killed somebody in a red dress. I also highlighted the blue coat with fox fur cuffs. As I had been going through these particular crimes, I started to see a commonality with a blue jacket with many of the suspects. I'm not sure if that's how this individual chose his suspects based on, they are wearing a blue jacket, but we're going to see a lot of that. So each time it comes about, I will go ahead and make notes so that you can see which crimes included that particular type of either red dress or blue jacket. According to the police report, her body was completely covered with bruises, blood, and mud. The face had been apparently beaten to a pulp. "Fuck you, BD" was written on the victim's torso with her own vividly hued red lipstick. Just below were the letters Tex. She had been stomped and beaten so violently that she suffered massive internal bleeding, a broken neck, and a punctured heart. The victim was quickly identified as 44-year-old Jean French. Not surprisingly, French's horrific death made front-page news and was quickly dubbed the lipstick murder. "Werewolf strikes again, kills LA woman," writes BD on body. And that's by the Herald Express. So here they are fantasizing with aliases or names that they can give this individual. And this is where the werewolf murders was dubbed. We do show that in one of the newspapers that her husband did actually take a polygraph, and I'm going to assume at this point that he must have passed it because he was not then considered a suspect any further. We do see the torso of the body with the inscription that's written in the red lipstick in regards to Black Dahlia. Oh, what is going on with this LA Weekly? Oh, no. Oh, all right. Technical difficulty. Hold on one second here. Let me get rid of that. All right. Let's go back to from current slide. All right. So Jean Nettie Axford was born into a large family in Texas on October 6, 1902. At the age of 18, she married David Yandel Rather, often described as a wealthy oilman. So back into the mix of oil. Is this victim a target? Is this victim just a random victim? A wealthy oil man who owned several large farms. That same year, she gave birth to David, her only child. The couple settled in Amarillo, where Jean worked as a nurse at St. Anthony's Hospital, but the marriage was short-lived, and in 1924, the young couple divorced. The pretty restless divorcee soon moved to Los Angeles with her son and continued to work as a nurse. In 1925, she married a man named David Thomas in Long Beach. They divorced soon after. Over the next few years, Jean lived an adventurous, unconventional life. She was put in charge of a band of nurses employed by a large oil company in South America. No coincidences there. Flying over jungles from oil field to oil field, she soon became captivated by the skies and learned to fly herself. She was a member of the Women's Air Reserve and the 99 Club, an organization of pioneering women aviators. By 1931, the flying nurse was gaining notoriety. One story syndicated nationwide featured a photograph of a beaming Jean in a form-fitting aviatrix uniform. Jean's love of flying consumed her personal life as well. In October of 1931, she married a fellow aviator named Curtis Bauer in Dallas. The couple separated only 5 weeks later. So here I'm not sure. Is she back in Long Beach where she is with her son, but now she's marrying somebody in Dallas? Again, this back and forth notion between Texas and Los Angeles is exactly what we see happening with Jack. The couple separated only 5 weeks later, and in February of 1932, Jean again made national news when she became the first person in Southern California to attempt to obtain a divorce by airmail from the liberal Mexican courts. I find the airmail part of this interesting because we are going to see some of these communications that are going to be sent airmail, usually from another country. And that summer, her story hit the wires again when she was reported missing by her mother. So 4 weeks from Elizabeth Short to the Jean French murder, and then the murders there are at 3-week intervals between killings, which is exactly like the Texarkana Phantom murders. So back to here where text written on the body, Jack is from Texas. We see many killings in Texas that he later takes credit for through the Laura Miller's anniversary letter and the Southern reference. One of the first flying nurses during World War II, married a rich oil tycoon, good friends with an oil heiress, Millicent Rogers, which obviously runs in tandem with the oil heiress Georgette Bauerdorf, which happened to be one of the very first victims of this suspect. The body found with her clothes piled on top of her. This is kind of a stacking habit that we see. It occurred in South Carolina with the bikes being stacked on top of the bodies. We'll see clothing that is stacked. We'll see bodies that are stacked on top of each other where there's multiple murders. Stacking also seems to be one of those MOs that we see in some of these crimes. And it looks like the stacking of the bodies was the Texas yogurt shop murders. So her shoes were found 50 to 60 feet in different directions. The body is covered in bruises, blood, and mud with heel prints on the chest and a pocketbook lying 10 feet from the body. It states that the anal tissue was damaged 1/8 of an inch. I, again, think that this was likely some type of an object. It does not indicate that she had been sexually assaulted other than maybe being or sexually assaulted with an object, possibly. The head injuries are from a blunt steel object. Maybe a socket wrench is what they were presuming at the time. This is just a little bit more information. They did indicate that the victim entered an old 1936 Chevy or Pontiac sedan accompanied by the suspect. He believes the paint was beaten up on the car, but it appeared to be an old brown color. Sam Young was the last person to see this victim alive. Now we look over to the right and we do see the dark coupe that Jack's mom owned at the time. And there's likely a good chance that Jack is using this vehicle back and forth from wherever he's getting to at this point in time. We know that he is still back and forth taking care of his mother. So she was last seen at the Pan American Bar at 11155 West Washington Place with a parking lot that separates it from the Piccadilly Drive-In. So now I'm a little confused. Was she at the drive-in? Is she in the parking lot? There's so many different stories that you're getting here, but they indicated they believed that she was with a suspect that was a medium small build, dark complexioned boyfriend who seemed to be having words with her as they left at 2 a.m. And the suspect's vehicle described as a 1936 Chevrolet or Pontiac sedan. On March 11th, 1947, we have May Lorraine Preston, which is the next victim in this series in Los Angeles, itemized as number 4 in Steve Hodell's book. I needed to research this because here we start to see strangulations with cords, and cords do become some type of a method or MO used in many of the crimes. This particular victim was found with an electrical cord, light cord looped around her neck and her head smashed in on a road that borders the San Gabriel River bottoms near Norwalk. She's 46 years of age, identified by 1943 fingerprints from working at a steel company, living at 115 Burton Street, Bellflower, California. Now, this equals Jack having worked for a steel company, and we are going to see an actual insignia or symbol on the Halloween card. And I believe it's found in a couple other places in the Zodiac reign, but the FBI did actually link that particular symbol back to a steel company symbol. So there is a relation there to the steel company, and that this particular individual also worked for a steel company. Jack worked for the steel company as well with the IAM and the USA unions. So the body's found clad in a thin lounging robe. Police believe she was strangled in her bed, then moved to the dump site. So I'm not really quite sure. Was she bashed in the head first? Was she strangled first? They believe she was strangled and then moved to this dump site. At what point do they believe that she was bludgeoned over the head? That I'm not exactly sure. So move to a dump site is a risky yet continuous MO found throughout these murders. So why, if you kill her in her bed, would you take the chance or the opportunity of being caught by pulling her out of her house, putting her into a vehicle, and then dumping her in a particular location, unless it was your goal to have her found immediately by the public? Here's a couple of individuals that were actually questioned in regards to it. Frank Funk in Southgate, California. He's a contractor with his son, Myron. It was interesting that these individuals were actually at let's see. So they were being questioned in connection with the slaying of Mrs. May Lorraine Preston. 4th victim of the Los Angeles murder cycle, 3 out of 12. Funk was arrested when he appeared at Miss Preston's home while officers were examining it. The interior of the contractor's car was badly stained and is to be subjected to chemical analysis, is all this says. Likely, though, that they were there actually doing work, as they were contractors and they were there doing their job. But of course, they became a suspect. I don't know too many suspects that would show right back up to work the next day, especially at the location of the place in which they had actually murdered the individual who was paying them. However, anything is possible, I suppose. On March 12th, 1947, we have Evelyn Winters on the DeCommon Street Railway in Los Angeles. 42 years old, found nude, bludgeoned to death in a vacant lot 2 miles from downtown, strangled, last seen in the bars the night before. So we are seeing that running MO of being strangled and bludgeoned to death. Like most of the murders, bludgeoned to death is something we're going to see, and something that the Zodiac actually states that he would do. Found nude, as many of them are. She was a legal secretary at one time for a film studio. It was mentioned the possibility that that film studio could have been owned by Cohen. And found at a railroad right-of-way, which brings back in the railroad tie-in that we've been talking about. 2 bags of her clothing were found in a liquor store where apparently her being homeless had dropped them for safekeeping. So on March 12th, 1947, the nude body of Evelyn was found in a vacant lot off of an abandoned rail yard. She had been bludgeoned and strangled to death. Her body had been dragged some distance before being deposited in the lot. Her clothes nearby were in disarray, and an autopsy found that she had potentially fatal blood alcohol level of 0.38 at the time of her death. Evelyn was a bright woman with a promising future ahead of her. She graduated from Vassar College and was known to be intelligent and scholarly. Unfortunately, alcohol got the better of her and her life began to go off the rails. In the months prior to her death, Evelyn was a transient living out of various beer parlors and hotel rooms, storing her belongings in a local liquor store. Evelyn was last seen with a man 12 years her junior, James Joseph Tiernan. Tiernan stated that he knew Evelyn for 2 years, and after a day of drinking together at the Albany Hotel, which we might say again, Albany will become another theme in this suspect's actual writing of communications in Albany, New York. Evelyn left his company around 7:30 or 8 p.m. Her body was discovered just hours later at 12:10 a.m. It was George Franklin Wycliffe who happened upon Evelyn's body and reported the crime to the police. George later admitted he thought Evelyn was passed out, drunk, and went to kiss her, realizing only afterwards that he had kissed a corpse. Evelyn's lipstick was on his face when he reported the crime. George was initially arrested for Evelyn's murder, but later released. Evelyn would be considered a high-risk victim. Her indigent, transient lifestyle and copious consumption of alcohol made her incredibly vulnerable to all sorts of predators. So here's some of the commonalities. We've got 3 murders in 3 months. All women frequented bars, struck on the head with lethal force. Bodies were displayed nude or nearly nude. There was no effort made to conceal the bodies. The bodies were displayed with intent to be found. All traces of the victims' identities were removed. They had to be identified through fingerprints. So where did these identifications go to? There is some talk, or had been some talk, from Dennis Kaufman in regards to Jack Terrence actually having a jar of IDs. I had not ever seen them myself. I'm not sure if they still exist or if they're still around. But that is something I intend to at least check in with and see if we can't locate that jar. The 4 victims were mutilated. The 4 victims were left outside where the bodies were sure to be found. 5 of them had clothing removed and 5 were beaten. The ritualistic similarities, not the MO similarities, indicate that these crimes were likely committed by the same perpetrator. The victimology, especially of the 4 victims, is strikingly similar, and the offender's behavior with these 4 women was also strikingly similar, excluding Georgette. Georgette was found in a bathtub, and Elizabeth Short's body had been washed by her killer. But if you tie those 2 particular portions of the MO back to the lipstick killings in Illinois, we found that he absolutely bathed all 3 of those victims. 2 of them one was actually found in the bathtub there in Illinois. One was actually bathed, and then the other one, the final victim, Susan Degnan, who had been bisected, had also been washed and scrubbed and cleaned and drained of blood. Again, something a butcher or something a hunter would do. So this brings us to our next communication in this particular case, and I've tied this one back to a couple different, or I at least think that it ties back to a couple different crimes. We'll talk about those. On March 15th, 1947, there was a suicide note from, we're going to call it the red lipstick killer, though the person does not identify anything but Black Dahlia in this particular communication. And this communication says, "To whom it may concern." We see that a lot. "I have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing." And you can see that the killing is spelled, again, incorrectly, just as the type print or the font was when it was cut out on the postcards. We have now 2 capital I's taking the place of what should be 2 lowercase l's. And then 2 lowercase i's surrounding those 2 capital I's in the middle of lowercase printing capital printing. So we can see that this particular communication is primarily written in capital letters. However, the letter I in the lowercase fashion has been used throughout this particular document. So, have waited for the police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in. So now we have the relating back to the turning myself in card. So this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for this, for that, or this. Sorry, Mary. So to kind of tie this in or to bring this in, sorry to Mary could either mean Mary Leary, which is out of the Texarkana Phantom Murders on 2/22/1946, or Mary Thames of South Carolina on 3/12 of 1944, and then as of recently, Mary Tate on January 18th, 1947. So we have 3 Marys that have been killed by, I believe, possibly the same suspect in the last, at least, it looks like three years here. Also, this is an anniversary, actually, of the marriage to Letha Marie Self. So Jack has married Letha on March 15th, 1947. So interesting that we have this particular letter. And this letter is said to be a suicide note that was left on March 15th, 1947 in the shoes of an individual who left their clothing and everything on shore to make it look like they walked right into the ocean committing suicide. This comes from the Black Dahlia Solution website. So that's where I actually found this letter. Again, going back, we saw the 2 capital I's in the place of the L's, the Black Dahlia 2 lowercase i's, and for the L's equaling, I'm not sure why I put this, an 88 pianist Bolden. I'll have to go back and see why I put that up there. But again, it's a suicide note, just like the lipstick killer indicated that they were going to commit suicide. The Zodiac indicated that the Titwillow poem indicated suicide by watery grave, and the OCCK indicated that he wanted to commit suicide in his letter to Dr. Danto, sorry. So the suicide note, sorry, Mary, admits to the Black Dahlia murder. This letter is connected to Zodiac, Titwillow, suicide note, and can't help myself like many of these other cases. So in the lipstick case, we heard that he couldn't help himself and that he needed help or he needed somebody to stop him. We're getting that same ploy in this particular note. The handwriting is being disguised in capital letters, and we see like I said, the use of the lowercase i's. The letter is designed with the same middle of the paper centering used in a poetic style of writing, which is very consistent with the lipstick killer, Zodiac, and more. Here I pulled out the word police in order to be able to show these similarities as we go through. We had it written in the Black Dahlia's writing, in the lipstick killer's writing, and in a 1963 letter to the Dallas Police Department in regards to the JFK murder. So we do see that the police, at least as far as the spacing in the lineup, is consistent. Also, again, the way the shapes of the P's are formed and the slant of those particular letters. When I bring this, I know somebody attempted to put in here Ed Burns, so you could kind of ignore that red highlighted Ed Burns down the center of the Dear Mary letter, or Sorry Mary letter. I did not put that in there. That was done on somebody else's website. But what I wanted to note here was how nice and straight the writing was on unlined paper. And we can see that that is something that the Zodiac was very, very good at doing. And we know that Jack as well, in previous samples of his writing where we saw that he wrote on unlined paper, again, was also very, very good at writing nice and straight all the way across. On May 3rd of 1947, we have another murder, Dorothy Montgomery, found under a pepper tree in Los Angeles. She was also found nude. Under the pepper tree, it is a relation to another victim that was sexually assaulted with a bottle tree limb, and an I-45 victims posed in circles under a tree. So there seems to be something with trees as well. She was 36 years old. I did not have a lot of information on this particular murder, but I did find that it was worth putting in here because it could also be related. Then on May 11th or May 12th in 1947, we have Lord Trelstad, which is in Signal High oil field in Long Beach. This is number 5 in Hodell's book. She's 37 years old, dumped in a vacant lot near oil rigs. Again, tying back into oil. Oil rail yard, one of the two. Even actually sometimes gravel pits. Again, I think some of these might even just tie back to mob syndicates. So she was found in a vacant lot near oil rigs after being last seen intoxicated at bars in Long Beach. Called the Mad Werewolf Murders. Again, bludgeoned, nude, stripped of her clothes, and, a strip of cloth or cotton garment around the neck. So there was a strip torn from men's blue and white shorts, and then she was strangled to death with that. Dubbed the Mad Werewolf Murders, as seen in the BD postcard of Armand Robles. She was raped. Now, I had actually kind of omitted anything that had to do with rapes from the possibility of Jack, because it did not appear as though he was raping anybody. If anything, he was just sexually abusing them with an object versus actually raping himself. So this one did make it in here because it was in Hodell's book. But again, I want to just caution on whether or not the rape was actually being publicized because it was an actual rape, or if she was actually sexually assaulted with some type of an object. So her hair and her face was bloody. The pattern in days between the murders equals the Zodiac and the Texarkana Phantom murders, Atlanta, Georgia, Texas, and Michigan, all of them. So we see this 5th victim that is claimed at this point. Let's see. An attractive mother of 3 children, Miss Laura Elizabeth Trelstad, 37, was found raped, bludgeoned, and garroted. Now, garroted, we're going to climb into because that's a very interesting statement that they placed there, because that requires a specific device, not just the actual strip of cloth. It would require something to tighten that strip of cloth, and that is very similar to the John Benet Ramsey case and possibly other cases as we go through. Being the 5th victim of a series of sadistic sex slayings, which began with the butchery of the Black Dahlia last January. Miss Trelstad's body was found shortly after dawn on an isolated road in North Long Beach. Her husband, Ingman, a truck driver, told officers she left a party or a friend's Sunday afternoon, announcing she was she was going to dance. Discovery of her body came a few hours. Did the PowerPoint presentation go away? Jason? It's not up. What has happened? Uh-oh. Oh, no. All right, from current slide. I think I know what happened. I lost my share screen. Okay, is it back up now? All right. Let me see what I missed here. Let's go back to the, I'm thinking we missed this entire thing in regards to the actual note itself. But here is the to whom it may concern. Sorry, Mary letter. Again, the suicide note from left at the beach in Santa Barbara on March 15th of 1947. Sorry you guys couldn't see that before. But once again, we see the way this was posed and placed right next to a Zodiac letter with a nice straight writing all the way across, using pretty much all of the paper. And back to here. So discovery of her body came a few hours after sheriff's deputies announced they had booked the husband of the 4th sex slaying victim on suspicion of murder. So Miss Trelstad, unlike her predecessors, had not been mutilated. Police said a preliminary examination indicated she had been raped. So there we have that. Her hair and face were bloody. She had been strangled with a strip apparently torn from a pair of men's blue and white shorts. And she joined a list which includes Elizabeth Short, Black Dahlia, whose severed body was found in a vacant lot on January 15th. Jean Axford French, 45-year-old aviatrix and bit actress whose torso bore an obscene inscription in lipstick. Evelyn Winters, 50, former film studio secretary, stabbed and bludgeoned. And Miss Dorothy Montgomery, 36, church-loving housewife whose nude body was found May 3rd beneath a pepper tree. So they are literally trying to tie all of these together. I don't see any indications that they believe that a different individual had caused these. So I have actually put this one back up. It says the slide is repeated since it's my belief that Bill received it at some point in 1947 based on the evidence that it was found on him. So I'm basically just throwing back up the note that Bill Hirons was found with in, I'm going to believe that it's May of 1947 because he isn't even arrested until June of 1946. So we throw that back up. There's reference to the robberies and a key to a locker, names of accomplices. There is a reference to business in Texas, and the name is Jock that's printed on here, but I have my suspicions about this letter due to all the dissemination of the evidence. So not convinced entirely about this, but there's a possibility of more than one person being involved from the beginning. On June 20th of 1947, we see the murder of Siegel, Bugsy Siegel was shot and killed in a Beverly Hills, California home. Siegel shot in the head 2 times while sitting on a couch reading a newspaper. Very consistent to the 1 year previous of the Starks of the Texarkana murders, where the gentleman Mr. Stark was sitting reading a newspaper when he was shot twice. Papers mention that the shooter would have to basically be able to shoot around a corner like the Texarkana Phantom murder and wounding of the Starks couple. So interesting to be shooting around a corner. Jack is an excellent marksman. Aside from being an avid hunter, he did learn to become well versed with guns and the ability to shoot in the military. So 20 minutes after the Siegel hit, Lansky's associates, including Gus Greenbaum and Mo Sedway, walked into the Flamingo Hotel and took control of the property. So they obviously were aware that this was going to be happening, and no sooner than they got confirmation that the hit had been completed, they were already taking over the Flamingo Hotel. According to the FBI, Lansky retained a substantial financial interest in the Flamingo for the next 20 years. Lansky said in several interviews later in his life that if it had been up to him, Ben Siegel would be alive today. This also marked a power transfer in Vegas from the New York crime families to the Chicago outfit. Although his rule was considerably more restrained than in previous years, Lansky is believed to have both advised and aided Chicago boss Tony Accardo in initially establishing his hold. On June 20th of 1947, oh, that is repeated. Let's not do that. This is also marked a power transfer in that too. Chicago mob connection and Cuba contributor who, like the Bush family, would have an interest once Fidel Castro is in power, with a direct benefit to the Chicago, Florida, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas powers where Jack began. After fixing Las Vegas, the tide is turned to focus on Cuba. And after World War II, Luciano was paroled from prison on the condition that he permanently returned to Sicily. However, Luciano secretly moved to Cuba, where he worked to resume control over the American mafia operations. Luciano also ran a number of casinos in Cuba with the sanction of Cuban President General Fulgencio Batista. Though the U.S. government succeeded in pressuring the Batista regime to deport Luciano. Interesting. Batista's closest friend in the mafia was Lansky. They formed a renowned friendship and business relationship that lasted for a decade. During a stay at the Waldorf Astoria in New York in the late 1940s, it was mutually agreed upon that in exchange for kickbacks, Batista would offer Lansky and the mafia control of Havana's racetracks and casinos. Batista would open Havana to large-scale gambling, and his government would match dollar for dollar any hotel investor over $1 million, which would include a casino license. Lansky would place himself at the center of Cuba's gambling operations. He immediately called on his associates to hold a summit in Havana. The Havana Conference was held on December 22nd, 1946 at the Hotel Nacional. This was the first full-scale meeting of American underworld leaders since the Chicago meeting in 1932. Present were such figures as Joe Adonis and Albert the Mad Hatter Anastasia, Frank Costello, Joseph Joe Bonanno, Vito Genovese, Mo Dalitz, Thomas Lucchese from New York, Santo Trafficante Jr. from Tampa, Carlos Marcello from New Orleans, and Stefano Magaddino, Joe Bonanno's cousin from Buffalo. From Chicago, there were Anthony Accardo and the Fischetti brothers, Trigger Happy Charlie and Rocco, and representing the Jewish interests, Lansky, Dalitz, and Dandy Phil Castal from Florida. The first to arrive was Lucky Luciano, who had been deported to Italy and had to travel to Havana with a false passport. Lansky shared with them his vision of a new Havana, profitable for those willing to invest the right sum of money. According to Luciano's evidence, and he is the only one who ever recounted the events in any detail, he confirmed that he was appointed as kingpin for the mob to rule from Cuba until such time as he could find a legitimate way back into the U.S. Entertainment at the conference was provided by, among others, Frank Sinatra, who flew down to Cuba with his friends, the Fischetti brothers. So now we actually have Frank Sinatra being thrown into the mix with all of these mob individuals. And we're going to see some talk about Frank Sinatra as we go through some of these particular crime stories, in which case there is connections between him and political figures. So we see that the mob is working its way in between entertainment, media, political positions, and the entertainment world, basically. So our next murder is on July 8th, 1947, Rosenda Mondragon on Elmira Street near North Main, 1 mile from Evelyn Winter's scene. She's 20 years old, strangled with stockings. Again, we've seen the strangled with stockings before, and nude. So this is consistent with the stalking murders. There is no rape or robbery. So again, what is the motive for this individual? I was not, again, able to find very much information in regards to this, but there was signs of torture. It's almost all murders, from Lipstick to Texarkana to Black Dahlia. This individual was sadistic and enjoyed torturing his victims. All of the above victims were white. All except Newton and Telestad were last seen in the downtown LA Hollywood area. Almost all, if not all, were sexually assaulted, though some indicating rape, some indicating sexually assaulted by an object. So to my knowledge, none of the crimes were solved. I think anyone looking at this series of crimes over the time period indicated, with all the similarities, would have no doubt a serial predator was involved. But police in the 40s and even through the 50s and 60s were unaware of such serial offenders. And this leads us back to that link blindness state where individuals were not aware or believed in serial killers at this point, or maybe they haven't even been named at that point. However, we do see that them over time and distance or proximity not putting these murders together correctly. It does appear as though these all happening at this particular time frame were consistent of a single individual. On October 2nd, 1947, Lillian Dominguez, corner of 17th Street and Michigan Avenue in Santa Monica, California, is killed. John Adams Junior High dance. She was walking home from this with her sister Angie and their friend Andrea Marquez. She was 15 years old, a student at John Adams Junior High. A man walked by at the corner of 17th Street and Michigan Avenue, and then Lillian collapsed. So the coroner determined that she had been stabbed in the heart a single time with a blade that was at least 3.5 inches long and a 1/2 inch wide. So a stiletto style knife, and the wound was 3 3/4 inch deep by a knife or an ice pick, they indicated, but they did at one point state that they believed it was a knife that had a 1/2 inch wide blade. And I don't believe that you could get that size from an ice pick. This is consistent with Betty Aardsma and Sherry Jo Bates, the size of knife that was used and the style of the killing. In the Betty Aardsma, which we'll hear about in the future, same type of scenario. She's standing there in a library. 2 men walk by. The next thing you know, she collapsed. Everybody thinks that she's just gotten dizzy or passed out from lack of oxygen or something, only to find out that the knife wound was so small that it had closed up around it, and that's why the blood was not pumping out. But she had, in fact, been stabbed a single time directly in the heart, as this individual was. And the Sherry Jo Bates knife size was also a 3.5 inch knife, 3.5 inch long knife with a 1/2 inch wide blade. In that particular instance, the suspect had stabbed Sherry Jo Bates so hard that he had broken the tip of the knife and bent the knife, which we did show in Jack's belongings, and we will look at again once we see the Sherry Jo Bates crime scene information. So a week after the stabbing, the killer left a note, and I haven't seen this one, but it says it's on a business card for a Mexican restaurant, which solidifies again the connection to Mexico that we see in the Black Dahlia and other crimes. And they'd left it under the door of a furniture store in Los Angeles. Now, not sure how that plays in, but I want to say I feel like the letter for Georgette Bauerdorf was left on a stone wall somewhere near something like that. Either way, this particular note said, "I killed that Santa Monica girl. I will kill others." This is actually the constant ploy written by all of the letters in these serial killings. So to say that I killed her, he wants the credit, he wants people to know he did it, and that he will kill others is a clear message that he is sending to everyone. So more, as with all the letters and crimes. Now, October 22nd of 1947, Jack is discharged from service at Tadson, San Francisco, California. However, we see that this particular, even though he is discharged in this particular state from San Francisco, we can see up in the left-hand corner there that on January 21st in 1948, so just a short 3 months later, he's actually filing and recording these documents in Atoka County in Oklahoma. So he's back and forth, just as I said, he's all over the place. So on January 21st, 1948, he files in Atoka County, which puts Jack back near Texarkana and free from 10/22/1947 through to 3/28/1948 until he enters the Air Force. So Jack may have gone back to Los Angeles, California, Texas, or Chicago, Illinois while he was on this trip to visit mom and let the heat die down. So get out of town. He's a ghost again. They're looking for somebody who doesn't exist. So shortly after he enters into the military, like I said, he resumes military on January 21st of 1948. By February 14th of 1948, we actually have our next victim, 36-year-old Viola Norton, abducted from the sidewalk at 1:30 a.m. in Alhambra by 2 men after the bars closed. She survived. She was beaten, bludgeoned, slashed, and dumped for dead blocks from the Elizabeth Short scene. She was beaten on her face and head with a tire iron. So this could play back into, I know that they talked about a round metal object, possibly a socket wrench in one of the previous cases, but this could also absolutely be a tire iron. So it says the headline of the Sunday Morning Herald Express of February 14th, 1948 read, "Woman beaten near Black Dahlia scene. Alhambra woman near death after beating by 2 men. At approximately 1 a.m. on Saturday morning, Miss Viola Norton, 36, left a cocktail lounge in Alhambra, a community immediately east-southwest southeast of Los Angeles city limits. Two men, both appearing to be approximately 40 years of age, approached her in a car and asked her to get in. She informed the two men that she was walking home. Both men exited their vehicle, dragged her inside, and drove off. The victim stated she remembered a tussle, but nothing else. Viola was beaten savagely about the face and head. Her skull was fractured with a tire iron, and the two men left her for dead in an isolated area just blocks from where the body of Elizabeth Short had been found 13 months earlier. A neighbor discovered the victim unconscious and summoned an ambulance. The information regarding any follow-up investigation was sketchy, but is believed the victim, though in critical condition, survived. The Norton kidnapping occurred only 6 miles east of where the bodies of victims Mondragon and Winters were dumped, and this crime occurred just 12 hours before the two suspects would commit another murder in Hollywood. Their next victim would be the real estate agent Miss Gladys Kern, which includes another communication. So we'll finish up with this next week. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend. It looks like we're about to conclude here fairly shortly the Los Angeles crime sprees, and we'll see that this takes place or moves to another location where we will find Jack at the same time. So for now, everybody, take care, have a good one, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Oh,